Welcome to Shelby Stitcher. This is Joan Parker. Thank you for joining me today. I have a granddaughter that is about to turn 7, and I wanted to make her a little tote bag to put some goodies in for her birthday. She loves Hello Kitty, and I found these fat quarters at Walmart, so this will make a very inexpensive little treat for her. I'm cutting the pieces 16 inches by 14 inches. They come in a piece that's 18 by 21 approximately. So I'm folding these in half and cutting both of them at the same time. I like to square up my fabric, and so I folded it in half so I would make sure I was getting the same amount on each side. This side is already cut to 16 inches. You can see this is 8, but this is on a fold, so this is 16 inches. So I'm going to cut this 16 by 18. I started at the 10-inch mark, so I'm going to cut it right here on the 28-inch mark, which would equal 18 inches. And I save all the small pieces left over because this can make a little pencil pouch or be part of a zip pouch. And I'll just set those to the side. Now I need to go find a fabric that will match this for the lining. And tote bags are very simple to make, and I'd like to walk you through the steps for that. I have lots of fabric donated to me, which I love because, free fabric. This is a solid piece of pink that I was given that's a little heavier than quilting cotton, but I think it'll be perfect for the lining of a bag. And it complements the pink that's in the apples and in Little Kitty's bow and jumper just perfectly. So I'm going to cut two 16 by 18 rectangles out of this pink fabric. Now I have my two outside pieces of the little Hello Kitty fabric and two pieces for the lining that are, all four of these are 16 by 18. Now I'm going to mark where I'm going to put the straps on the bag. I'm going to do it 5 inches in, and I'm just going to make a little mark with my Mark Be Gone marker. And I'm going to center some mesh straps on these after I get this put together. Now to sew the lining and the inside together, I am going to leave an opening on the side of the lining because I'll come back and sew that last. So I'm just going to put two little marks here, and I will sew from here up to here, and then I'll sew from here and up, and I'll leave this open for turning the whole entire bag right side out. And I'll sew these two pieces of the print fabric that will be the exterior of the bag. I will sew these right sides together at a 1/4 inch seam the whole way around the bag. I'm not sure you can see where I'm pointing here, but I'll sew 3 sides, leaving the top open. And I'll be leaving the top open of my lining as well. I'll just sew down to that blue line, start the blue line, and go around and go back up to the top, and then we'll do the next step. I have tons of this polyester webbing, and what I did is I cut 2 straps 14 inches long, and I'm just going to take a lighter, a barbecue lighter, and singe the edges of it. It melts the edge, and it'll keep it from fraying as it's being used in the bag. Now that I've sewn my lining, I started at the top, came down to that blue mark, left this opening, and then went the rest of the way around the bag, leaving the whole top open. I took my iron and I pressed the part where I'm going to be pulling the bag through later. I pressed each side back a 1/4 inch with a heavy press and used my clapper to keep that nice and creased, so that when I turn it inside out, these will already be turned back and I can just sew those together. So now I'm going to take both bags and cut out the corners in the bottom to box the bag and make it have a little bit of width and not be just completely flat. You've probably seen those videos where somebody takes a square, or they mark a square and cut out the corner. And that's essentially what this is. However, this is a special tool, and I don't buy many special tools, but I made over 100 bags this past summer for a craft show, and this saved me so much time. This is called the boxed bag template, and you can do many things with it. There's a rounded edge. If you want to curve the corners of your bag, there's a dart, and there's a corner cutter. So I'm lining up the 2-inch mark on my seams. You can either do it on the seams or on the outside edge of the bag, but whatever you do, you need to be consistent. I'm going to take my smallest rotary cutter, and I just slice up toward the corner, being very careful not to bump up and then run over my finger. And then you can just pull out that corner. And I'll repeat that on the other corner of this bag and on both corners of my exterior fabric. Now I'm going to go over to my sewing machine, and I'm going to open up this corner that I cut out and hold on to these 2 edges and match up this seam. And I usually double sew really close to each other a 1/4 inch seam across each corner, all four, the two exterior and the two interior. I'm also going to take my webbing and I'm going to sew this to the inside, the right side of my bag. And you can see my blue mark that I put on there earlier. I'm just going to center this on here and I'm going to pin it. You can see how this is a right angle. If you let it get like this, when you pull it up, your bag handle will be going crooked. So what I do is I lay it like this, and I'll put 2 pins in here, perpendicular, parallel to the outside edge of the strap to keep it in place while I sew that 1/4 inch around. And that way those will be in place. Whenever you put the other side on, you want to make sure not to have a twist in your strap. So I put those on, and I've done this hundreds of times, but you can see how this will come up and will not have a twist in it. So be careful putting those on, but I'm going to go put those on and then I'll be right back. So here I have my exterior bag with right side out, and here's the boxed corner. You can see how that turned out very nicely. So I have that right side out, and then I have my lining with the straps down inside with the wrong side out. And here's my opening to pull it through in just a few minutes. So I'm just going to take the inside, I'm sorry, take the right side and push it in. And I'm going to line up the side seams and pin that, and then push this one in. Let me give it a little flip. There we go. And now I'm going to line up this side so that my 2 seams are dividing the fabric up equally. And then I will pin on each end, and I'll pin in the middle between the handles on both sides and pin in the center of that, so that I spread that any fullness out. They are the exact same size, but that's how you distribute that fullness. I'm going to do a seam the whole way around here, and then I'm going to go down here in my opening and pull this through and turn this inside out. So I hope you can see that. Now that I have the exterior bag right side out put inside, this is so confusing. You want the right sides together with the exterior of your bag on the inside. Then I'm going to make this seam so that it nests, and I'm going to put a pin in there. Then we go all the way around to the other side and do the same thing. I'm going to line up these 2 seams, and I like the leading edge of the seam to have the seam facing the needle so that they nest properly and don't push that fabric up under, if you know what I mean. And if you don't, you probably don't have a problem with it. So I just nest those seams and I put a pin in there. Then I'm going to hold those 2 pins and I'm going to find the approximate middle by working my way in with my fingers. And I'm going to put a pin right there between the handles. Here's one handle, here's the other. Then I'm going to hold that edge seam and the handle, and I want to make sure that handle gets up there nice and flat. And can you see that seam? There we go. I'm going to put a pin on both sides of the handle, but not on the handle, as it's somewhat thick and heavy, and it'll pull that seam down. There we go. Then I'm going to come over here, and again, I take these 2 pins and pull them out slightly, and just put a pin in between the 2 of them. I'm going to go over here. There's my other handle on this half. And again, I'm going to hold the handle part with my finger because it is a little heavier. And I just run my fingers down and make sure that it's going perpendicular to that seam. And then I want to pin this. And then hold that. Pin on this side of the handle. And then do one halfway between the side seam and the handle. And I'll repeat that on the other half. And then do a 3/8 of an inch seam the whole way around the top. I have my seam sewn the whole way around the top, and you can see where the mesh handles are caught in there as well. I wanted to mention here that when I sew my handles on to either the lining or the exterior, I sew several times across the handle to reinforce it, and then it has this seam on it, and then once I turn it inside out and top stitch it, it will have a 3rd or 4th or 5th seam on it. So here's my opening that I left in the lining on the side, and I'm just going to gently pull this through. Being careful not to tear my seam. And you can see that I'm almost got the whole exterior of the bag out. Now the interior of the bag will come right side out. And I'm going to take this corner and push it in with my fingers and pull on that. And I'll push my fingers through to pop those corners open. And then you see I have this little part of my seam that needs to be sewn, and that's why I ironed them previously. Now I can just pop those in together, and I'm going to pin along this edge, and I'm going to change my thread to a pink thread, and you can see I'm going to stick my ripper in here so you can see where it ends, but I can see that tiny bit of the light blue line where I marked it, but I don't need to worry about sewing up here, but I will take a couple stitches when I start just to make sure I keep that enclosed. And then I go down to this end and do the same thing. I'm going to put a pin right where I need to stop the seam, but I am going to sew a few stitches past that mark just to make sure that that is all enclosed and that I won't leave any little bit unstitched. And then I just pop that inside, and again I pull out on the sides and find the middle, and I put a pin in there first, and then I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to put a pin in right there. And when you put your pins in, I'm always sharing these little things that I've learned over the years the hard way. When you put a pin in, you want to put it in on the diagonal. You don't want to put it straight down and then wrench it this way, because when you do that, see how much of that fabric comes across to the other side? You want to keep the top edges of your fabrics even, so hold them where you want them, put the pin in diagonally, and your seam will still be the same at the top. Now I'm going to get some pink thread and put it on my machine and sew up this little area from the top. And once I push it inside, you won't even be able to see that seam. It won't be noticeable at all. There's the edge of my top stitching on the side seam. It's barely visible, and I didn't even use a measurement. I just got it as close to the side seam as I could. So now I'm ready to turn my bag the right way and top stitch the top line. Now I have pushed the lining down inside the bag, and I'm going to go around this edge, and I'm going to pull it open, and I'm going to roll it up like this so that that seam is right at the very top. And these were nested, so the seams are going opposite directions. So I'll start on this one side, and again making sure it's as flat as I can make it, and pin that. And I just pull out any loose threads because I think they make it look sloppy. And again, you don't have to do it my way, but that's the way I like it because I like my projects to be very neat. Okay, then I just roll a little further, farther, whichever, and pin that, and I go around the whole way. And I'm doing this slowly because this is the top stitch, and this is the thing that will stand out when somebody sees it at first, and I want it to be very, very neat. So I'm going to pin on one side of the handle, and then I'll roll down on the other side, and I'll just continue the whole way around the top of the bag. And when I'm finished with the pinning, I'll go through and do like a 1/8 inch from the edge top stitch, and then I'll probably do a 1/4 inch or 3/8 inch from the top to catch that bottom. And again, the handles will be sewn in 2 more times each. And I'll show you my finished bag. Now I'm going to start sewing my 1/8 inch, and I'm starting right here where the seam is because that's on the side and will be the least noticeable area. And I'm going to pull my threads back and hold those since I don't have a leader under there, and they will pull through otherwise. And I'm not going to sew over any pins. Move that over a little bit. Now I'm going to start my 1/8 inch sewing. I'm going to start right at this seam on the side, and I want to make sure that all the rest of my bag is pushed out of the way, and I'll constantly be monitoring that to make sure that my bag and the rest of my pins are not getting pulled out. I'm going to hold this for a couple of stitches because there's no lead or ender in there, and I'm going to go backward, and then I'm sewing probably about 1/8 of an inch, maybe a little bit less. And again, I keep readjusting the bag. I pull it forward, but I keep this under part back away from my foot. And then I'm just going to sew the rest of the way around here, removing the pins as I get to them and holding that handle in place so that it gets stitched securely in there. And I'm going to sew the whole rest of the way around the bag, and then I'll show you when I'm finished. And here is my finished product. You can see how roomy this is, and it's got 2 layers of stitching around the top edge. Whoops, where am I? There it is. Here's my finished product. You can see how roomy this is, and it's got 2 layers of stitching around the top. Since the bottom is boxed, you can see how much room there is in here for library books, or a trip to the park with snacks and a stuffy, or maybe even to go spend the night at a friend's house or Grammy Joe's house or a grandmother's house. and you can put a change of clothes in here, some snacks, a small pillow. These are wonderful for grandkids. Last weekend, I had the privilege of seeing my 4 grandsons, who are siblings, who live in South Georgia, which is about 7 hours drive from my house. And they came up for a different occasion, but I was able to meet with them for a few hours. And so I quickly whipped up 4 little tote bags that were things that they were all interested in. There was one that was outer space and space travel, one was baseball, one was dinosaurs, and one was camouflage. Their father is actually in the Air Force. So, anyway, I made them each a bag and just filled it with little books and treats and a piece of clothing each. And it was just a fun time to see them enjoying all their treasures. So, make a bag for a little person in your life, or maybe a big person that needs a little cheering up. Just put in some snacks and some of their favorite items. I hope you found this helpful. If you enjoyed the video, please take a moment to give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment if you have more questions or if you'd like to comment on what you saw today. Thank you.